Hey, everybody, this is Coach Bill Hart with the All In podcast, and it's my pleasure today to introduce you to a guy who's completely all in. Richard Milligan landed on this area of focus of recruiting for leadership inside the mortgage industry, although soon to transcend that. And he's really turned it into a very, very specific focus. But I want to tell you, if you're a loan officer, there's as much application to what Richard talks about for you recruiting referral partners. The same things exist. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Richard Milligan. Richard, I can't believe we're finally here. This is pretty exciting to me. How are you?
I'm doing. It's another day of doing what I love, Bill. So I always say
What
it's
a great
officially
answer.
living the dream.
I love that answer so much better than living the dream. I hope people really heard that. That's it. I may quote you on that and give you credit for it. Another day of doing what I love is a spectacular answer, particularly in light of the fact that you know as well as I do, there's an awful lot of people that can't say that,
There have been seasons for me, Bill.
right?
Okay, so it hasn't always been like this, right? That's the beginning of a
Understood.
great story.
I had a summer cold last week. Like, who gets colds in the days of COVID and monkeypox, for goodness sakes? But whatever. I had a cold, went into my lungs. Somebody asked me how I was, and I said, I'm having a health appreciation event. Like, right? You can't
Uh,
appreciate your health unless it's absent every
oh,
once in a
that's
while. And
funny.
so for you and me, who have had jobs and roles that, maybe weren't the most exciting things for us, to be in a place as we both are, which is so cool, where it's like, man, every
Yeah.
day is just a pleasure. I love stepping into this. So let's jump right into this, man. I want listeners to really sort of understand how the heck you got here, who Richard Milligan is. You've been in the business for how long?
Well, so I started 4C recruiting in 2017. Spent 15 years prior to that in the mortgage industry. We do a lot of consulting, coaching, advisement in the mortgage space. So I've been in this space for about 20 years.
Prior to 4C, you
Mhm.
were a guy in the mortgage
Yeah,
industry, and you were
I
running
was.
branches and building branches and recruiting and kind of figuring it out, right?
Yeah, I got into the business in 2002 when it was super easy. My brother-in-law was a mortgage broker, and I was like, if John can do this and be as successful as John is, like,
That's
there's got to be
everybody
a
knows the John.
there's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's there's got to be a possibility for me. And then took the journey through like broker side, and then things changed in '07, '08, and '09. Moved to the full retail side, and up until like 2013 I was producing and leading teams at the same time. So producing branch manager and then a producing area manager, and then I transitioned going into 14 into non-producing, and had some things that happened. The company I was with changed my compensation model. That'll always get your attention. And
Right.
it was just the timing of like I had this yearning in my heart to lead at a higher level. I go back to like 2013. I was 40, almost 40 years old. That's an
Yeah.
interesting timeline for a lot of people. It's like that I want more. You've got enough experience and know-how. You can start teaching people, and you have more to give to people. And so I went all in on building teams and leading going into 2014, which was a scary place to be because that
Absolutely,
production
man.
is a security blanket.
I love that so much. I don't know if you remember Peter Uberoth, but he was the head of the LA Olympic Committee in whatever year we had the Olympics out here in the 80s, and he described himself as a contrarian, and that you look at where everybody else is going and then go the other way, and there's so many great examples of that, from Elon Musk to Richard Branson to whomever. But you do strike me as that guy. Like maybe that was conscious, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was just an obvious lane for you that opened up, but nobody else was in that space. I mean, that I'm aware of, and I've been in the industry 30 years. I know people dabble, but I don't know anybody who's been, to your point, all in, right, when it comes
Yeah.
to recruiting. What was that? Just take me back to that moment where, did planets align? Did a lane just sort of form for you? Or did you decide that,
Yeah.
man, this is what brings me energy? I love this.
I do think you look at your values. I'm very aware of my core values. Is something that I coach a lot around is the values. I go back and I look, and just a driver for me consistently is lying awake in bed thinking about growing something, building
Mm,
something. And not everyone's a builder, but God has given me, like on a Colby index, I'm a quick starter. That's my strength. And I purposely, even when I designed my coaching curriculum in 2017, I was like, where would I most come alive?
Yeah.
And so we created a 12-week program because I love starting people. I love building things. I love, the growth aspect. So there's definitely a really strong core value there that if someone was like, "Hey, we'll pay you 3 million to sit on a manufacturing line and to weld the bolt on the door," I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm
Whoa.
out."
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
So,
I always tell people in that moment, it's like, man, that's when I open up a vein and lay down in the bathtub. Like, there's just not a chance in the world you could get me to do that. I love that. I love that you were self-aware enough to understand that that's the way that you were wired and that that's something that you needed to step into. So I want people to know I've sat in a room and listened to you talking to a group of Richard Milligan's 10, 15 years ago, right? These were let's call them branch managers, area managers, most of them still in production. And look, for people, and I'm talking to people in the mortgage industry right now, you guys know this. If you're a producing branch manager, it is an inherently schizophrenic role. It just is, right? Tommy Hopkins, one of the greatest sales trainers of all time, years ago in the 70s, he said, do you remember Tom Hopkins? Do you know who I'm
oh
talking
yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
dude, 5 feet tall, right? And, memorable hair, but amazing guy. And he said, if you're in sales, everything that you should be focused on every day is what is the most productive thing that I can do at any given time. And so if you're wired as a salesperson, thrust into a management role with an override, right? So you're stuck in this weird place of, mm, if I do this loan right now, if I follow up with this borrower, if I call into my database, that's, three, four, five, six, $8,000, whatever. But if I start thinking about a recruit or pouring into someone who's already on board or training them or correcting them or going on a sales call with them, yeah, I'll see something down the road, but tomorrow, because today I'm going to close the loan. So I saw you, this is the way I described you when I watched you in that room. I said, it's as though he gives them each a balloon, and on the balloon, the helium balloon is an objection as to why they don't recruit. And then he walks around with a pin and he pops them one at a time, right? Isn't that kind of what you do?
Yeah, it really is. It's easy to do that because I was in that position.
Yeah.
I purposely, in the beginning, began calling them recruiting leaders, not branch managers, not area,
Yeah.
but recruiting leaders, because it
Nice.
has to be an identity shift, right? Area manager sounds like, like recruiting may be optional.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
But when you're in a growth role, recruiting is not optional. It's part of your role and responsibility. You have to embrace it. So I don't call people areas, branches, market leaders. I call you a recruiting leader. You have to embrace it as part of your identity, and it becomes an identity shift. But because I sat in that role, I sat down one day when I was creating my coaching and I said, how many roles did I actually have? And I started making a list. It's like, you're the chief HR person in your office. The moment you got an HR issue, you're the go-to.
For
You got
sure.
your server went down, you're the IT person. You're the person that develops the marketing strategy. You're the Monday morning meeting person. You're the one-on-one person. You just started making a list. I was like, holy cow, there's 17, somewhere between 15 and 17 things that person does. And so they're professional jugglers is the best way to describe them. Only they've got three balls in the air that are on fire. Like several of them they see as rubber balls. That's problematic because the recruiting balls are rubber ball to them. I don't
Yep.
have to catch it today. It'll bounce up tomorrow until
Yep.
you get to 2022. And then it's like
Right.
it's suddenly a glass ball. It wasn't in 2020 and 2021, but now it's a glass ball, right? And the
Yeah,
personal
man.
production thing is always the glass ball, right? You never drop it. You won't drop your own realtor. You won't drop your own,
Sure.
loan. You won't drop those things. And so for me, like in the beginning, I just started giving people new identities because
Yeah.
I recognize your main objection is going to be what mine was for a long time. I don't have time to recruit.
Sure.
Okay, great. Let's talk about that. And let's address that. And there's just all the big list of objections that I know I had over the years as to why I didn't recruit because there were other things that were more important.
You
And
bet.
and some of those are identities that are great identities, like I'm a servant leader. What a great identity to have. You serve your people at a really high level. That's part of your identity. I love it. When servant leadership means that you are 1 minute to respond on every email and thus don't have the capacity to recruit because you're too busy,
Yeah.
right? That becomes problematic. And so, really helping leaders understand that there is a way to not only produce, but to be a successful producing leader that recruits is something that you have to connect for them, because they will then create their own narrative around recruiting, and whatever the narrative is, but it's a false narrative most times.
Yeah, that's so well said, man. So what are two or three of the most common objections that come up about why I don't recruit or can't recruit or I'm too busy? What do you hear most of the time?
Well, recruiting's hard. I suck at recruiting. Recruiting's hard. I don't have time to recruit. One of the things that we built a framework. This is the number one question I get from CEOs in this industry. How do you get your market leaders to recruit? Okay. And there's several problems to be solved there. One is you never set the expectation for them.
Mm,
Okay. And at some point you change that, where you have the expectations without agreements. Those are very toxic to the
yeah,
organization. So you've got to clarify what are your expectations around that position. And if you're going to come in later and say, now you got to recruit, you better clarify and gain agreement on that, not just say it, but gain agreement on it. That's an organizational issue. At a market leader level, though, I'm not that good of recruiting a recruiter, or that recruiting is really hard. I don't
yeah,
have the time to do it. It's the narrative. And what we've found is that it's a lack of education. Like at some point, I have a 15-year-old that his aspiration is to play Division I college basketball, and he's been playing basketball since he was 10, and he's had at least one coach, and at sometimes as many as three coaches, and he's 15, right? And he's like a top player in the US. He's got a great shot if he can stay injury free. But at no point when he was 5 did I say, go to the driveway and take a lot of shots and you got a chance. It doesn't happen
right,
that way. It
right.
might have happened 30 years ago that way.
Sure.
Doesn't happen like that today. But
Yeah,
we're telling our recruiting leaders, pick up the phone, press into a power hour, make more dials. And what we're telling them is, go do more of the wrong thing,
right.
because they don't have any strategy, they don't have any structure, they don't even have a good script. They're
Mm,
calling their recruits in their market where they've got one shot to cross the relationship bridge, literally one shot. And they show up and they say, would you be open to a better opportunity? Okay. And it's like pulling the pin on the hand grenade and throwing it on the relationship bridge.
yeah.
And they get to these places very quickly. They're like, I've called everybody in my market. And so I don't know what else to do. It is
I've
what it is. We
I've
move
heard
on.
this whole thing so many times, man. I mean, you're living in it, you're marinating in it. So I know you get it. People that are watching or listening right now, come on, you guys, you know that he's nailing it. This is exactly where you are if you're in that role or you work with someone or for someone who is in that role. And so now let's flip that. Do you remember an old sales trainer on the real estate side, Floyd Wickman from Detroit?
I don't. How old is he, Bill?
I'll call him, he might be 80 at this point, right? So,
But
Tom Ferry.
oh, huh.
Tom Ferry's dad is Mike Ferry.
Yep.
I used to run Mike's company for him in 1990. And at the same time, Mike kind of had the West Coast going. Floyd had the East Coast going, right?
Gotcha.
So he was a very old school sales trainer. And he would say, in sales, you have to hurt them and flip them. And when I first heard that, I thought, ew, that sounds painful. But what he meant was show them the pain, then show them the solution. So you've just shown us the pain, like
Yeah.
poor expectations, poor training, poor standards, poor accountability, too many responsibilities. And it's not even in my job description or on my title until today. And now we're doing power hours. Like, this is painful. So all of that hurts a lot. Let's flip them now. How do you equip people? And I should point out that
I love it.
you have
Yeah.
written a book called How to Dominate Recruiting in a Digital World, and
Mhm.
a link will be in the show notes down below. You guys, I've already ordered my copy. I would suggest that you buy at least one, and depending on your role in the organization, you might want to buy 10 or 20, because this is exactly the type of content that we need to be sharing with people as an industry that is an industry. Forget your company, forget your leader. As an industry, we have done a horrible job with this. Here's my theory on this. I think it's because it is such a profitable industry with mediocrity. If you run a mediocre branch, if you run a mediocre area or division or a company, when rates are 3%, oh my goodness, like, it's, unless you're part of a Medellin cartel, I don't know where you make this kind of money, right? So all of a
I
sudden
agree.
rates go to 5 or 6 and it's like, whoa, where did the leads go? The phone stopped ringing, and now we all start paying attention to like solid business practices. Am I
Yeah,
right, or am I
yeah.
wrong in that?
No, you're so right. I have so much empathy for that recruiting leader because I go back, and of course the book's been written. The book is there's all kinds of stories in the book, and I'm crazy proud. We have a team of 40 content creators here, and we have 7 writers on staff. And so where I'm a D plus English student, I brought in people that have written Hollywood
Nice.
scripts and are
Well
30
played.
plus years, in as an English teacher. And so
Great.
we're really proud of the product. But I look at that book and I go, with the growth DNA. Right? If you're a leader that really wants to build something and grow something, I go back to 2002 where that gene was still there. How, if I had that book and I understood how to execute on a strategy, okay, here's a big aha. Okay. Vision without a roadmap is not vision, it's a goal, right?
You bet.
Vision, actually, the purest definition of vision is roadmap to what you want to achieve. The book's a roadmap. Okay.
Nice.
If I had that book in 2002, who knows
Yeah.
what I would have been able to accomplish? Because in the book, the people that we're coaching are building companies. Like I just did an audit for a company that is over 35 years old. That's doing a couple $1 billion in business, in the mortgage industry. I'm helping leaders accomplish that in 2 years.
That's amazing. Let me
That's
stop you for a second. For listeners that may not know what you mean by audit, you're going into the company and assessing where they are right now in terms of recruiting. Is that
correct.
correct?
We go through and we do surveys of all the people that are what we would call recruiting leaders, and we just unpack, where are you right now? What's the state of the union?
Yeah.
And most times what we're saying is you got no shot at accomplishing where you want to go unless you do one thing. And typically that one thing is this: it's education. Bill, like when I go back to my son's
Yeah.
story, like where he started, he has coaches now, but where he started was with teachers. Like if you've got a 5-year-old and you're working with him on basketball, you are teaching him how to dribble the ball.
You
You
bet.
are teaching him the fundamentals of where his elbow should be when he shoots. You're
Mm,
teaching him these things. You're not coaching him,
sure.
right? And there's a difference between teaching and coaching. You
Oh
have to
my
teach
goodness. Yeah.
before you can coach.
That's right.
And as an industry, we have never taught.
Yeah.
And teaching forces you to slow down, right? Coaching
Yeah.
says go to the fundamentals. Well, what do you do when someone doesn't even understand the fundamentals?
Yeah, it's so good, man. So check this out. I just posted this the other day. It's in my book, but it was a quote by Archilakis, and he said, "We don't rise to our level of expectations. We fall to our level of training." And I had used it in reference to the military because I was interviewing Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and a Top Gun instructor. And so if you think of it in that world, it makes complete sense, right? Like I'm not going to rise up to my level of what I hope is going to happen. I'm going to default to what I've been trained in. And to your point, there's been an enormous chasm there in the industry, like no training, no equipping.
Yeah, and here's where it shows up. As an industry, our churn numbers are
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah.
Okay, and we, as an industry, have to ask ourselves why. Like, why is
Mm,
this true? And one of the conclusions I've come to is that the narrative of how we bring people to the organizations is a poor narrative.
yeah,
We'll give you money.
yeah.
We'll give you better comp. It's the toolbox at some level, right? and
Mm,
and one of the big ahas I had, this was like 2014. It was just like the perfect setup, which is that 3 years prior to this transition window for me that I talked about in 2013 going into 14, I had been on the board and chaired the board for an organization called Family ID, and ID stands for intentional direction. And as an organization, what we help families do is create vision, core values, and legacy statements.
mm,
So I've done this with my family, and I'm sitting here going, why haven't I done this in my? Why haven't I accomplished this in my business?
yeah,
And so going into 2014, I created a clear vision for my team. I could very clearly articulate that to people. I had identified my top 4 core values. I called them my pillars at the time, and I could articulate those to people. And in early 2014, where I went all in on recruiting, I was confused by the success that I was having. I mean, I remember having a conversation with my wife and saying, something's going on in the industry, but I haven't quite figured out what it is yet. I was like, there's got to be a current that's pulling people into this. And ultimately, what I figured out was about 90 days into this, there was a young man on my team by the name of Rob Cole. Rob Cole was a good producer in my market. He was doing about 10 units a month. And I recruited him in like 2.5 weeks. I was like, holy cow, I'm a great recruiter. It was unusual to recruit someone that
yeah.
fast. And
Oh,
my
of
I
course.
would take a year to recruit people easily.
Sure.
Rob shows up 3 days in. Rob's in the same office that I am in. My door's open. Rob's door's open. He's calling all his real estate agents and he's saying, let me tell you why I'm here. And he was taking my core values and he was sharing them with his real estate agents and aligning them with like the organization's value system.
Mm,
This is why I'm here. And in that moment, I was like, oh, that's interesting,
yeah,
right? Like Rob is not here for the toolbox. Rob
right.
is here because of who I am as a leader. And I
Yes,
realized like in this little framework, all of a sudden, like Richard's the product. Like the company's not the product, Richard's the product.
you bet.
I had just figured out with vision, core values, and my why, how to articulate myself, the ingredients that existed inside me as the product. And so as an industry, we fail our leaders when we don't say, hey, listen, you're going to be the thing that people are going to be motivated to move towards. And if
You
you
bet.
offer something else, it's going to be really hard for them to move towards that. So your alternative is going to be give them a bunch of money up front to join the organization because then they can develop their own value system and their own vision.
Dear Lord Jesus, may we be delivered from that old model because look, here's what I think, man. I think if we had a way to track it, there are people in a softening market when rates go up, right? Leads are more scarce. I know that there are people who are like, uh-oh, I need to make a move because I need some cash.
No
I
doubt.
mean, we could call them something. Maybe you have a term for that. And I'm
Mercenaries.
not
We turn them into mercenaries.
we do. That's a perfect term for it. That's a perfect term for it.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not broad brushing an entire group of human beings that are decent human beings, but if somebody was doing 3 to 5 units in 2020, 2021 and all of a sudden 2022 comes along at the time we're recording this and they might have one deal and it's got hair on it, right? Because they haven't built relationships. They don't really have a machine for this. What else are they supposed to do? I mean, are they going to go sell shoes at Nordstrom? Like, this is
Right.
kind of like where they're at. And they know this is a model. If I go talk to them, put on my best suit, show up really well, they're going to put X number of dollars cash down on the barrelhead. That buys me 2 or 3 months. And I'm hoping things get better.
No
Dude,
doubt.
this is not a strategy and it's endemic to the industry. So you just described something really powerful and you call it becoming an attractive leader. And I think it's really interesting, Richard, because you're the first person I've ever heard describe this where it's like the company has a value proposition, the company has a culture. You need to know that. You need to be able to explain that. And I know I'm paraphrasing this poorly, but
Mhm.
you as an individual leader need to become an attractive leader to those people that you're talking to. That very story you just told, while you hadn't done it deliberately, you saw the outcome. You saw the ripple effect of you being an attractive leader. How do you help people step into that identity?
Well, the first one is the awareness you need to create it.
Yeah.
Okay. And for a lot of leaders, this has blown me away, Bill, over the last 5 years. I've invested about 11,000 hours. I mean, this week I'll coach 41 hours. Okay. Which is crazy to do that
It
for
is
that window
crazy.
of time.
Yeah.
Uh, in that window of time, I've had one person show up being able to articulate their vision and being able to articulate their core values. I've had a handful of others that are like, let me find the piece of paper I wrote it on at an event that I went
Right,
to,
right. Sure.
right? Or let me get back to you. I put it somewhere. But if you can't articulate this to someone, then you don't have the capacity to convince someone that you are about that,
Yeah.
right? And so we fall to our default, which is our company's awesome. That's the default.
Right.
And so the awareness of you that you don't have it and that you need to get that is the first place to start. And then the second part is that like it's hard. Like I mean, you know this. You spent when the time that you spend at building champions, like you guys do a lot of that, working with people on vision and
It's where it all
values. And
begins. Yeah.
the where I a lot of times pick that up is that leaders will develop those things and then put them down because they don't understand the connection to motivating people to them.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
and that was the big aha that I have. And so for leaders, like the awareness of this is important. The next thing is this is not going to be easy.
Right.
Like if you've ever come up with a clear vision, like a 10-year vision, that is freaking hard.
For sure.
Right. And you're gonna have to really fight for this. I mean, to the level I got on a plane, flew to Nashville for 4 days, booked a house in the Cumberland River that had the backyard opened up to a 5 mile trail. And on my way to that house, I had my Uber driver stop and grab me a big white sheet of of white paper at a Staples, so that when I got there, I took all the pictures off the wall and I lined the walls, and I just started dreaming, right? In day
I love
one.
that,
But 4 days
man.
later, I was exhausted.
Yeah.
But what I had was clarity on a vision,
Yeah.
right? And over the last 5.5 years, we've executed beautifully on that vision. But most leaders have no strategy, but a general idea where they want to go. And when they sit with a recruit, vision is your seed of desire.
Right.
Like anybody like that, like desire is tricky because I buy some weird things that I didn't plan on buying in a moment because it showed up. I had desire to buy it. Like there was a frame where there was like,
Absolutely.
the true story, Bill. I recently bought an ice chest that actually operates also as an AC unit. Okay,
Handy.
$650 later. Okay, I'm kind of embarrassed. I've got it. This I just did this. Okay, but
Yeah.
in a moment I was like, well, the girls they ride horses in the summer. It's super hot, and
Yeah.
having the functionality, having something that doesn't have to be plugged into about it. It's like in that moment, desire was relevant. As leaders, we have to figure out how to plant seeds of desire with
Oh, yeah.
people. That's vision. That's where the heck are we going? Is exciting. It should be energizing, but most leaders can't articulate it,
That
right?
is so good, man. So as an example, and you mentioned with building champions, we always this was Daniel Harkavy's structure. I worked there nearly 20 years. We figured out 17,000 hours of coaching, and over that period of time, wasn't doing 41 hours a week, I can tell you. But the math still works out, right? He's always started with, we called it the core four: life plan, business vision, business plan, and then priority management. So with the vision, one of my very best clients, a guy named Josh Metal, who if you haven't crossed
No, Josh.
paths
I
with
know
him, you
Josh.
will
Yeah.
at some point. Great guy, owned, I don't know, 100 rental units by 40. I mean, just really built something special. And he said, what I realized with the business vision is it enabled me to like take an anchor and throw it over my head out into the future, into an idealized future. And then every day, my job was to pull on that rope closer to that vision. And when things like the air conditioning ice chest came up, if it didn't fit into the vision, it's like, don't need it. That's not part of the plan, right? Or modify the vision. That can happen over time too. But brother, I love you calling this out because the clarity of that vision is enormously powerful. I'm assuming that you speak to that in the book. So
Would you?
one more reason, you guys, to buy the book, preferably 10. But all of this leads to now, you mentioned the digital world. I've heard you speak about this. I have been more visible than I probably should be on social media for the last 12 years or so, because Gary Vaynerchuk challenged me years ago in a book called
Mm.
Crush It. And he
Hmm.
said, it's all about video, man, that 10, 12 years ago. And so I've just been very visible, and it's made my brand, Richard. And it has made, I mean, it's the reason I'm with Movement Mortgage. That never would have happened had I not built a personal brand and just been pouring legitimately, and I hope honestly, into what I believe, the things that matter to me. That's what I push out. How do you help people step into that? Because that's the other thing they're going to tell you in a classroom setting, like, I don't have time for social media. I delegate that. I outsource
100%.
that. Like, really? Then it's not you.
Right.
What do you do? I
Right.
don't know. Speak into that. Speak into social media as part of this
Yeah.
puzzle and
Here's
solution.
look, this is leaders have to this is where they really need to pause. We talk in the book about something that we have coined, and we'll probably write a book on this in the next year called the value gap. We see these leaders that are literally building companies in a year and 2 years. We had a leader last year in 3 quarters that attracted over $2 billion in annualized volume. And people are like, well, that's not possible. It is possible. And here's why. Like the things that have mattered for hundreds of years still matter. And what are some of those things? When we talk about like an attractive leader, someone who's got a really high core value system, that's always mattered. It's not
Yeah.
new. Right? It's
Right.
just always mattered. So leaders that have had really high core value systems. I love what Rory Vaden said once. He said that reputation doesn't grow linearly; it grows exponentially.
Mm.
Right? Your core values are your reputation. Right? And so always historically, leaders that have had high value systems have actually always won. So we're talking about value or values. Leaders who contribute lots of value have always won, right?
Yeah.
So like this exchange of value, like player coach, or let me help you grow your business, or let me
Right.
help you Let me help come alongside you and bring value to you. So core values and value period has always mattered. But when you look at these leaders that are building billions in a year or 2 years, the difference is that they're now able to go to digital and now able to show people I bring value and I have values, and that's where the exponential comes from,
Yeah.
right? And so today, the digital world, if you want to grow quickly, you're going to show up, and to your point, you're going to humanize yourself. Like, you're
Right.
the brand, you're going to humanize yourself. And if you've got high values and you are a person of value, and now you're in the digital world humanizing yourself, it's like, I remember being like a young kid and playing Super Mario Brothers,
Mm.
and like one of my friends introduced me to like these cheat codes. Like, there was like, if you got to like stage 3, there was like this turtle you could jump on. If you jumped
Right.
on it in the right space, you got like an unlimited number of lives
Yeah.
for the remaining time you were in the game.
Yeah.
And these leaders have figured out the cheat code today is digital,
Mm.
because when you show up and you're human, and think about it, this is like, this is why digital is so powerful. People are like, well, we're drowning in noise. We are, but we're starving for value,
Mm.
right? And a leader shows up that has high core values, that is a person of value, that can then humanize themselves on this platform, and that becomes gasoline on a spark. And so
Totally
when you
does.
look at all the recruiting data is very supportive of this. That digital is not playing just a role, digital is playing the major role in recruiting today. So companies that want to grow that have zero digital presence, sorry to announce to you, got no shot.
Oh man, I hope everybody that is listening right now rewinds 5 minutes and just like play that back again, because that is so powerful. Then immediately run, do not walk to LinkedIn and make sure you follow Richard, because your posts absolutely represent what you just said. It's funny, man. One of the things that I just posted this week, I don't know if you saw it, but it was a picture of my son and I in front of a
I did.
restaurant
That was
before he
awesome.
gets ready to go to Thailand, because he's a Muay Thai fighter and he's going to perfect his skills, right? But I also talk about the fact that he's not the boy I saw when he was being born. He's a completely different, unique human who is amazing. And I just talk about my son with great pride. That blew up. Like, that post blew up. I could talk about my company and list numbers and so forth. It'll do okay. But man, you talk about something from your heart that is humanizing, that people can relate to or aspire to. It is incredible. So, Daniel Pink, who famously wrote the book Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, probably 10 years ago. I don't know if you've read his book, and I haven't yet, but I did order it. His book on selling, I think he
Mm-mm.
wrote it in the last year or two. It'd be an interesting one for you, because he says the same thing that you just said. He said, you have to recognize we've been in Zoom meetings the past couple of years, watching babies in the background without diapers and dogs walking around behind them, and people trying to make their background fuzzy so you can't tell they're in a bedroom. And he said people are getting tired and their BS tolerance is very low. And so he said what we must do in sales, and ultimately this is selling, the recruiting is selling, is we must be helpful and we must be human. And so for those of you that are listening or watching right now and have not made that leap from the transactional to the relational, please listen to Richard. Please buy this book and find a way for it to connect with your heart, because each one of you has a unique story. You have a unique way to become that attractive leader that Richard talks about. It's not going to be Richard's way to do it. It's not going to be Bill's way to do it. It's going to be your way to do it, completely customized.
It is. And here's an important aha for leaders to have, Bill. This is not new. A lot of people are like, well, social, it's ruining everything. We put together a number of case studies for the book, and we went on this journey to just say, in history, where has personal brand mattered? We get back to like the 1920s. Winston Churchill basically gets driven from political life. Okay, worked his way to the top, fell out of grace in politics. This is World War One, in this era where, like, we're dealing with Hitler and Nazism, all these things.
Absolutely.
Winston Churchill went on a world tour. Okay, at the time there's 42 states in the United States. He visits 28 of the 42 states by train in the U.S., not his country. Doing what? Getting on stage, speaking. He wrote nonstop articles. Okay, he literally had people transcribe his speeches, and he would turn those into publications. right? He wrote articles for weird things like Ladies Journal magazine in the US,
Wow.
right? Radio was a platform then. It was a
Yep.
relatively new platform. He is all over the radio, consistently being interviewed. And at this time, he's not the Winston Churchill that the world knows today,
Sure.
right? It just happens that he built his personal brand at a level when Nazism was an issue in the world and he had a strong platform to have a voice to speak against it. The Winston Churchill that we all know changes the course of history
Oh
only
yeah.
happens because Winston Churchill used publications, the works that he did in terms of the beautiful books he wrote in that window of time when he wasn't the Winston Churchill that we all know. He wrote books, he wrote articles, he did radio, he did world tours. And at the time, today we could fast forward and go Facebook, LinkedIn,
Right.
Instagram, Twitter, right? These platforms, it's always mattered. The difference is that the platforms today are different than and so as a leader, you
Absolutely.
come to these places where like, hey, if you're going to recruit and you build a team and you want to have impact and influence, the digital world's going to matter to you. Now,
Yeah, man.
if you're a leader that just wants to grow something for money, good luck,
Right.
because leaders that have high core values that really contribute value that now can access digital, you got no shot today, right? And so we love the evolution of social
Yeah.
because now people can go there and say, is there proof? I can see it without ever having to get in a conversation with
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, I love this more than I can tell you. I look forward to listening back to this because now I've been taking some notes, but I'm literally gonna listen to it again and take more notes, partly because we do that for production, but partly because that is for me. You're sharpening me as a leader and the leaders that I coach. This is now content and micro content that I can now bring to them. So I just cannot thank you enough. So in closing, your audience here is, again, primarily the mortgage industry, probably, a few real estate agents here and there, people that run, real estate companies. But if you had one final thought that you wanted to share with them at this unique season, at the time that we're recording this, it's the summer of 2022. There's a lot of shifting going on, a lot of uncertainty. I call it, it's like prairie dogs in a Texas desert, right? When people start looking up and kind of looking around like, where should I be? Where should I go? Who's going to survive? What model's going to be here? What model's not? Where is the puck going to be that I should skate to? In this unique time, what would be one final thought that you would share with our audience?
Well, with the marker for this season, Bill, is that in where there are more unknowns than knowns, right? You end up in transition management. You end up in these places that are called the neutral zone. Like
Yeah.
we're not we haven't quite got where we want to get. We're kind of in between, like one season and another season. People are looking for people that have answers.
Mm,
Certainty is influence, right? And so for leaders that are certain that they have a value stack that they can contribute to people, it's time for you to actually be known. It's time for you to be in digital. It's time for you to humanize yourself on these platforms because people are more willing. We call them collaborative seasons, normal competitive seasons, right? And then collaborative seasons.
nice.
When you're in the unknown and you show up as a leader and you say, would you be open to building a relationship? I'm interested in building a relationship right now because I'm willing to collaborate at scale in the unknown season.
You bet.
It's time for leaders to actually that really truly have value to bring. If you're one of those leaders, to be known in digital and to be present with the value that you can bring because people will move towards you,
Yeah,
right? In a season like
absolutely.
this, because they're looking for answers. And those leaders that are certain will be the ones that will have the most influence in this season.
Richard Milligan, I so appreciate you. I have used a very broad brush term for years called gravitational pull recruiting. That's what I call it. But I never really had any framework underneath that. But it was sort of the basic message that you teach, which is become an attractive leader, right? And if you become an attractive leader, you will create gravitational pull towards you. You have created the framework around this. You have now written a book around this. Did I mention, by the way, that Richard has written a book? I think you should order one and preferably 10. And immediately follow him on social because this is a man who will speak truth into you, who will encourage you. And at some level, you're going to be engaging with him anyway. So I just look forward to that happening. Your challenge is going to be scalability. How do I scale this thing as I move forward? Because there's only one Richard. But what a wonderful problem to have. Richard Milligan, what an honor, man. I so appreciate you making the time for us today. You have sharpened people today, you have challenged them, and you've encouraged them. So I thank you for that.
I appreciate you having me on, Bill. It's an
You
honor.
bet. Take care, brother.
Thank you.